It sat on the table, wrong. Black, old, heavier than it looked. The strap curled like a sleeping thing. No dust on it. Dust everywhere else. It had not grown here. It had been placed. I stayed standing. I didn't touch it. She passed by, eyes catching then slipping off. Not mine, she said, already moving toward the sink. Her phone buzzed in her hand, a red banner across the screen. Battery low. She flipped it face down without breaking stride. The camera stayed where it glared. Keys. A receipt. A half-drunk glass. The camera sat among our mess with the confidence of a guest who knows the address. Leather cracked at the edges. Screen scuffed. A piece of torn sticker clung to the underside, clear glue webbing the seam. It wasn't here yesterday. I let that settle like a weight on the table. She turned the tap and let it run too long. Shoulders set, head angled away. Leftover from the trip bag, she said, voice flat, as if naming it tucked it back where it belonged. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at the camera. The water ran anyway. I watched its lens. A thin ring of dust outlined where it hadn't been. Someone had wiped the circle with a careful thumb. The strap's metal ring was polished on one side, dulled on the other. A wrist had worn it recently. Not ours. I kept my hands in my pockets. Her phone lit up again. Battery low. She silenced it with her thumb, then pushed it to the edge of the table like a bill she wouldn't open. No charger. No movement toward the wall. She opened a cupboard instead and stared at rows of bowls as if counting them. The screen dimmed. The warning waited. The camera's battery door was taped, 2 layers, not neat. The tape had been peeled up and pressed back down with a rough nail. One screw was newer than the others. The numbers on the base were rubbed to a smear, then carved over with a pen. Not careful. Not careless. Someone in a hurry, then someone who returned. I stepped closer and stopped short of its shadow. She shut the tap and dried her hands too slowly. We've got enough things, she said, aiming it at the air. She didn't wait for an answer. She picked up nothing and left the room. The phone stayed on the edge. The camera held center. I marked the angle. Lens slightly east of the door, strap tail toward the chair, sticker remnant facing up. A clean quadrant where it had been set down with intention. She let it sit as if it were mine to move. I let it sit as a record. Her screen blinked its warning again and died to black. The rail warning sat in plain sight. I waited for the latch to settle. The room didn't move. I used a sleeve and lifted the camera by the strap, clean grip and no prints. The screen woke dim. The glass stared back. It wasn't a toy. Mirrorless, small, silent. The card held more than stills. I opened playback. The timeline ran like a fuse. The first clip showed the bed from waist height. Sheets crooked. My shoulder in frame, then her hand entering, steadying the lens. She never looked at it. The setting never blinked. At 2:41 the door opened a finger and hit metal. The chain caught. A silhouette paused in the slice and held. The lens didn't panic. A different timestamp. 4:17. The chain was gone. The door swung a full arc. A wrist with a sunken scar crossed the frame and slid the lens a degree. Whoever owned it knew where to point. I stopped the clip and ejected the card with a nail. The camera went back where it had been, but 1 millimeter off. A witness that could be impeached, and then restored. I picked up her dead phone and set it near the outlet without a cord. I slid the card into my wallet behind the room key. The bed stayed unmade like alibi. Downstairs the lobby smelled like citrus and low heat. The desk manager had a crisp tie and soft shoes. I leaned my ID on the counter and kept my voice flat. I need to check the corridor feed from last night. The request sat in the air while the printer hummed. Policy arrived in his eyes, then loyalty in my number. He thumbed a drawer and gestured me behind the luggage cart. We walked past mirrors and a door with a keypad. Access came with a side glance. The hall cam had the whole wing. He scrolled to 112, her figure, head down, leaving. At 3:58 she returned with the hood up, quick turn, inside 2 minutes, then out at 4:09. At 4:17 a.m. man in maintenance shoes tapped a master and went straight in. The elevator never bothered. He froze a frame. The same wrist passed under the dome, scar like a faded crescent. He checked the time again and looked at me for a cue. The timestamps did what her voice hadn't. No copies, he said, tone measured, eyes on the policy sheet. I wrote the times on a napkin and folded it under my thumb. The napkin slipped into the wallet with the card. The elevator took its time back up. My reflection stood straighter than I felt and didn't blink. At the door I listened, key ready, camera angle mapped in my head. She was inside already, chair pulled back, hands in her pockets. She glanced at the table, then at my jacket. "Your charger?" she asked, eyes on the outlet. I let the silence carry the answer. "You left your camera on," I said, and closed the door with the chain still hanging. Her fingers paused at the strap and then kept moving. The hinge said more than her face. I slid the bolt with 2 fingers and left the chain where it was. Her chair scraped a finger's width, then settled. The outlet hummed without a plug. The hinge kept its comment to itself. The camera's power light blinked under her palm. She didn't look at it. Her hands stayed in her pockets, thumbs hooked, shoulders still. Power wasn't the problem. I pressed the card door. The spring gave me the SD, warm against my nail. She half stood then sat. It had been busy. I set the card by the sweating glass and pulled the reader from my jacket. The laptop woke hard, screen bleaching the table. Thumbnails tiled into rows. The grid told a cleaner truth. Last file was video. I clicked. The room opened, same lamp, same bed, same angle. The door chimed, chain rattled, a low voice off the screen. 2 shapes brushed past the TV glare. 2 shapes, not one. She turned the tap and filled the glass to the brim, then handled it like it mattered. "Turn it down," she said, eyes on the sink. The water covered nothing. I froze a frame and dragged the exposure. A wrist crossed the corner. Thin, white band. Not hotel. The ring next to it had a deep notch in the bezel. I had seen that ring at check-in. I scrolled back. Hallway carpet, a fire map, elevator panel with 4 lit. The lens caught a door plate. 417, polished, smudged. Timestamps stacked at 217, 221, 223. The times cut through her story. Her fingers left her pockets and found the strap, soft pull, slow. "That isn't the point," she said, eyes not leaving the table. "Erasing doesn't rewind hallway carpet." I opened the menu overlay. Silent mode on. Shutter disabled. Exposure lock set. The focus box stayed nailed to the door line. This wasn't an accident. The audio bled under the AC. A chair leg against carpet. A man's voice, close to the mic, careless. "You said he was out?" Then a laugh that knew the room. I didn't need more words. She moved between me and the screen without quite doing it. Her hip touched the table edge and then backed off. "We can go down and talk," she said, thumb bumping the strap again. We weren't going anywhere. I slid the card from the reader and palmed it. The laptop fan held steady. She watched my pocket like it might decide on its own. "This stays with me." I unhooked the chain and let it hang free. The door breathed and stopped. She didn't reach for the outlet. The charger could wait. I eased the lid until the fan dropped a note and left it there. The card sat warm in my pocket. She stayed by the outlet and kept her hand off the plug. I opened the folder I'd already built. Timestamps, angles, little squares of corridor skin. Patterns held. Her lapel, the strap, the same jacket in frame after frame. At 2:13 she slipped past the ice machine and turned left. The bag sat higher when she went out than when she came back. "You went through that?" She didn't come closer, just angled her body like the strap might disappear. The clip looped her into 418 without a pause. I rolled to 237. The door to 418 opened again. Not her. A man's shoulder and a sleeve, head at an angle, quick drift to the stairwell. The camera didn't catch a face. "It wasn't what you think." She had the tone people use before they attempt to shift blame. I let the footage speak under the fan. At 3:02 she was back at our end. Her key missed twice. Her head dipped to her phone, screen low, thumb dead on glass. The lock took her on the 3rd pass. The screen washed to live view. The corridor outside our door lay clean and empty. The far edge stuttered like heat. A soft knock came. She straightened, strap creaked once against canvas. The second knock landed in the same spot. I walked to the frame and stood out of the hinge line. "Front desk," I said to the wood voice flat. Air pressed under the door like a held breath. "Housekeeping." The voice was sanded down, wrong time, wrong word. The clock on the microwave said 3:11. I slid the card deeper until the pocket seam bitted, and worked a second card under my heel. The laptop screen faced the door now and held the handle in its black. Her phone lay face down by the lamp. I turned it over and fit my cable. The red bar popped at 3%. A banner blinked and died. "Who's in 418? I didn't make it a question. She pressed her lips until the color left them. No one. Too fast, too tidy, no breath behind it. She watched the cable instead of me. On the feed a shoe tip edged into the frame. No cartwheels. No apron hem. Rubber, flat, waiting. The knob twitched. The chain hung dead, unhooked and useless. I put the phone on the desk and gestured her off the line of the door. She slipped left and kept the strap against her chest. The wood flexed a fraction under the weight from the haul. I opened an inch. A sole jammed the gap and held it. Your name, the voice said, almost friendly. My palm met the door and pushed with the arm, not the hand. The shoe didn't move. I leaned in. I shifted weight to the hinge and pressed through the heel. The gap held an inch of rubber, black and scuffed. The smell of wet carpet came off the hall. He repeated the line, patient. I said nothing and rolled my shoulder into the wood. The hinge complained once and went quiet. Sir? The tone turned gentle and slow. I slid my right foot against the baseboard and used the door like a lever. The rubber dragged, squeaked, didn't give. I angled down and sheared sideways. Breath moved on the other side, close to the crack. There was a second breath behind it, colder and waiting. She had the strap tied across her chest. I pointed at the chair with my chin. She moved without a sound, toes careful on the carpet. I let a fraction of space open, then drove the door on the shoe like a press. A muffled vowel came through the wood. The second breath didn't move. The chair hit my hip. I fed a loop of the strap through the handle and down to the chair leg. She held the slack taut with both hands, faced to the door. I tied it once and then again, not pretty tight. I leaned back with my weight and felt the cord bite against the varnish. The foot tried to pull and failed. Front desk, the voice said. It came from the side now, not the crack. I watched the bottom of the door. Nothing slid under. Open so we can verify. I looked at the room phone. I left it sitting in its cradle and counted the seconds. The hall stayed friendly. They using my name? She asked, too soft for them. I turned my head. She didn't meet it. From the hall I heard it. Ms. Klein. She blinked once and set her jaw on the strap. They weren't guessing. I went to the peephole. The lens showed a shoulder in a blazer, badge sleeve, no badge. The brim of a cap sat at the far edge, where the fisheye thinned. No cart, no tray, no clipboard. Above them, a dome camera tucked into a soffit didn't reflect a thing. They were standing in the dead wedge. A ring hit the room phone. 2 beats. I lifted and didn't speak. A woman's voice poured syrup. For your security, please. I watched the man's mouth shape the same words a fraction late. He held a small black box near his lips and smiled at the door. I hung up and let the line die. Steel kissed from the other wall. The adjoining door handle tried and stopped. I put the dresser into it, drawers clacking once and then shutting again under weight. She fed me the strap end, and I wedged it into the top drawer and kicked it shut. Both sides asked to be let in. He tried a new name. Mr. Hale. It didn't belong to me. He had 2 cards and a tone that worked on drunks at 3 a.m. I reached for the phone I'd left on the desk and saw the red sliver in the corner blink once and go black. The room had one eye now. I took the camera off her neck. She let it go and kept her hands on the strap. The last image lived on the screen before it slept. A hallway, different carpet, same dome. The man in the blazer walked behind her in the glass reflection. The timestamp was 20 minutes before I met her in the lobby. What else? I said, not loud. She lifted a finger and traced an invisible box in the air, slow, like she was framing something that wasn't there. I scrolled with my thumb. Every picture had a mirror holding someone who shouldn't be in frame. The foot slid free when they gave up the angle. The door came in a half-inch before the strap caught and held. He tapped the wood twice with his knuckle, polite again. We can resolve this, Ms. Klein. I stared at the peephole and let him hear only the air in the room. The elevator chimed at the end of the hall. Shoes moved, one set forward, one back. I flicked the bathroom fan on and off and waited for the rhythm to come back. It didn't. Silence pressed in with the carpet and the paint. We leave by the balcony, I said, already moving the curtains. She nodded once and followed. The door would relax behind us like a muscle unclenched. The night air off the alley cut through the heat of the room. We stopped being listed. The balcony rail was tacky with old paint. The alley sank below in a narrow V of brick and wet air. A camera perched on the opposite cornice, lens black, dome dusty. I tilted my head. The red LED slept. The ladder bit my palms. I went first. She swung over without a sound, breast short, knees tight. Her phone screen ticked on in her hand, pale square on her skin. 3%. I held out my palm and didn't blink. She didn't give it up. She pressed the side button, watched the screen go dark, then slid it into her sleeve and pulled the cuff over it. Her jaw set once. I dropped to the next landing. The metal sang low. We hit the dumpster lid and rode it. It hissed and settled. The alley mouths were bookends, one neon, one dark. A cigarette ember floated and then dropped a floor down. I took us left, into bleach and fryer air. A service door with a keypad waited behind a crate of onions. The letters on the keys were rubbed off except 1, 3, and 8. I pressed them in sequence. The lock clicked like a throat clearing. Inside was linoleum, pale and scuffed. The hum of laundry drowned the building's silence. We passed stacked towels, a line of empty carts, a blinking exit sign that had lost its red. A radio crackled at the far end with someone reading numbers like prayers. She stopped at the first tee in the corridor. I caught her sleeve and raised 2 fingers. One shadow crossed the distant wall and kept moving. The smell of chlorine muted. We took the other turn. Security was a glass cube with a limp fern and a wall of screens. No one inside. The monitors rolled through feeds, lobby sofas, vending alcove, our hallway. I stepped in and shut the door with a soft touch. The room was colder than everything else around it. I scrubbed back on the 4th screen. The balcony outside our room flared into grain. 2:08 a.m. The slider opened. Only one figure stepped out. Her shoulders. Her hair pinned up with a pen. She didn't look down. "You went out," I said, hand flat on the desk. The pen in her hair tonight matched the shape on the screen. She watched the floor by my shoe. The next clip cut and clean. 2:11. A second person stepped out to join her, just a coat, hood up, face blurred by the camera's angle and a cheap LED stutter. They stood edge to edge, weight balanced like people finishing a decision. The LED flare hid their eyes. Her phone buzzed in her sleeve. Battery warning, faint vibration. She didn't reach for it. I photographed the monitor with mine, screen white on black. It caught the timestamp and the shape of the hood. Then my own battery through the same red. There was a license plate in another angle, down in the service lane, van half out of view. I hit pause and leaned close. 3 letters clean, 3 muddied by rain. I said them once, steady, and she nodded as if to balance the sound. A key rattled in the hall. Lights slid under the glass door in a narrow blade. I killed the monitors with a hand on the switch. We listened to the blade move across our shoes. "We take the stairs," I said, already turning. She pulled her sleeve tight and didn't look at me. We left the ferns shaking in the air we carved. The stair door took my weight and swung slow. The hall blade thinned and shut on the carpet line. The latch found home like a small cough. Concrete steps dropped in blocks. Numbers stenciled on gray passed tight to our shoulders. Her knuckles skated the rail and stayed on it. Above, a room handle turned once and stopped. The stairwell caught a footfall that wasn't ours. I pressed 2 fingers into her sleeve and waited. We took the next flight on the exhale of that sound. A housekeeping cart nudged through a landing door and squealed. I looked past the mop head and saw only wrists and rubber gloves. Her phone lit in the dark like a fish eye. Battery low sat over a thumbnail of our blue screens. I palmed it and killed the glow. A radio cracked 3 floors up. Words came thin through cement, enough to know a path was being chosen. We kept the cadence small and even. The service level door had a keypad glossy with use. I tapped useless numbers, then stepped back. She slid a thin card where no slot existed and took the click. Heat hit us in a wave of starch and bleach. Laundry lines trembled from the ceiling. I took a bag and dragged it so the cotton lay across her shoulders. An earpiece man pushed a bin past with his head down. He looked at the floor, not the face. We drifted with the carts and the steam. The loading bay opened to rain that had the weight of buckets. A dome camera watched the dock with a red dot steady as a held breath. I turned my jaw and gave a cheek, not eyes. She tapped my elbow and cut right, not left. A door marked no entry hung on one hinge. I let her lead because the clock had decided for us. The room was a chemical closet that never met a window. Crates stacked to a vent grill that had forgotten screws. I shoved wood and took the first rung with my forearms. Metal gave under us with a hollow bark. The crawl space tightened at the ribs. Her breath hit my boot and stayed quiet. Her phone quivered again in my pocket, a weak plea. I slid it out, killed its thirst, and saw the scroll of thumbnails mirrored from the hotel's feed. It had synced while no one watched. We dropped into an unlit conference hall that smelled of glue and applause that happened to someone else. Banners lay rolled like bodies against the wall. I lifted a corner of curtain and marked the sedan by the canopy. 2 men smoked under cover and watched rain lines. They sat easy with time and a motor. I closed the gap in the cloth. The side fire exit had a delay that lived in my hands. I pressed, counted, and felt the magnet let go with its small bow. The alley took us without style. Water ran in sheets off a downspout and into our shoes. The hotel's back end hummed through concrete as if it were the sea. We moved fast enough to look slow. The alley narrowed into a loading throat. A hooded camera blinked at its own rhythm under a rust lip. I watched 2 cycles and stepped when its eye went dull. We crossed in its blink. A box truck nosed in, white grill wet with street. We folded into the wall, brick cold through our jackets. Her phone threw a thin red sliver before I palmed the screen. The icon misled louder than the footage. The back gate held a chain that only pretended to work. I lifted the loose side and let the padlock hang like a charm. She watched my hands and kept her mouth shut. We left our steam behind the fence. The street opened with wash light and flat faces in glass. A sedan idled 2 doors down, windows dark like sleep. I turned left without asking. The car didn't move. That was worse. 317. I said into the wet air, not to wake anything. Elevator camera, floor 5, your door. She brushed rain from her cheek with 2 fingers and didn't look at me. The minute hung where she left it. We cut into a garage that smelled like old brakes and soap. Concrete dripped rust on rust. I slid the phone out and brought up the clip. A shoulder, a coat, a left hand on the door frame. Her ring finger had the same thin pale band. The scar in the frame had nowhere else to live. It isn't me, she said to the floor, voice smooth as a receipt. She tucked both hands under her sleeves and watched the drain spin. The drain kept its own counsel. I found an outlet by a vending machine with no snacks. The cable was wet but honest. The screen climbed from red to a thin line of breathing. I tied her hair into my eyes with the clip and hit send. We watched numbers rise like a slow siren. Tires hissed on the ramp below us, new wet coming up. A door slam rolled under the concrete like a drum you don't want to hear. At 62% I killed the cord and swallowed the phone. Half the truth is still enough to cut. We rode the stairs down 1 flight and back out into wash dark. She slipped on the last step and I put a hand under her elbow to keep quiet. My other hand typed an address and a time with no greeting. I didn't add a word. Who else has it? I asked with my eyes on the street, not her face. She counted something behind her teeth and shook once. Truth is a clock, not a sentence. We moved under a canopy where the rain didn't have rights. The sedan turned into the mouth of the garage we'd left. I showed her the opposite curb like a life raft. We crossed without speaking. We took the curb and kept our backs to the glass of a shuttered salon. My breath came white on it, and faded fast. She stood inside my elbow and watched the gutter. Traffic shoved water into the drains and left us alone. Distance is a tool. Names, I said, letting the words sit between us like a marked bill. She pulled the sleeve of her coat to her knuckles and checked the street without turning her head. Farah in security. Jens on nights, she said, each name clean. 2 more doors we had to close. We walked to the kiosk at the corner where the clerk never looked up. I slid bills for 2 burners and a card with minutes, then broke the plastic like wishbones. She took the heavier phone and didn't pocket it. Paper leaves softer prints. Farah first, I said, scrolling a keypad with my thumb while watching the reflection of the awning. She gave the number low enough to make me lean. I sent 1 line that wasn't a threat. Audit packet out of sequence. Need the minute at 1:17. Silence hung without weight. She kept a mirror, the woman beside me said, not proud, not pleading. It was policy after the last leak. Jens pulled a copy when the guest collapsed. He said it kept his shift safe. Her voice had no place for conscience. Holes speak louder than footage. A vibration hit my palm. Farah's reply came without punctuation, just the time and a place I knew. Delivery dock B, grocery on 3rd, 40 minutes. I kept my face level and nodded like a stranger reading weather. She wanted to see our shoes. We moved off the curb into the press of umbrellas. The sedan didn't come out of the garage, but the corner camera held static like a held breath. I pushed the dead phone into her hand and pointed at the blue mailbox. She watched the screen flash red at the top, the same warning that started this. It begged and then died. Jens? I asked as a bus hissed and hit us for a second. She nodded once. He'll want to be seen, she said, and that told me enough about his spine. I marked an entrance off the alley and a second off the freezer corridor. We turned air into a corridor. I took her palms and placed the burner in them the way you pass a glass in a wake. If it rings, don't answer, I said, and her pulse jumped once under the heel of my hand. Just count to 10 and put it down. She closed her fingers like a hatch. We cut through the market where the floor always smelled like bleach. A stock boy dragged a pallet jack and didn't look up. Above us, the dome cameras blinked their red sham. Pharaoh would be watching, but not for us. Outside the dock, rain came thinner, cut by steam. I checked my watch against the dock clock that had been stuck at 10 to 2 for a month. Tires brushed water. In the dark beyond the bollards, someone clicked a lighter and failed. If she ran, Jens would still come. The lighter failed again, then died. The man in the dark cupped his hands and gave up. I kept my back to the dock door and my face to the bollards. The rain had lost interest. Headlights cut the steam twice and went black. A door hinge argued, then settled. The man who stepped out set his foot like he owned the concrete. His coat stuck to him at the shoulders. It wasn't Jens. He stopped just out of the drain's shine. You brought it? His teeth flashed like he practiced. I stirred the keycard in my pocket with my thumb and let the pallet jack's wheel squeak once. He smelled of new tobacco and wet nylon. He'd never been inside. He glanced up at the dome cameras and smirked at their dead red. The other one slipped off the shadow by the dumpster, hands in his pockets, hip turned to hide the bulge. The dock guy kept stacking boxes and didn't see a thing. They split the angle. My phone buzzed against bone. One vibration. Then a photo from Farah crawled over the lock screen and stopped. Grainy overhead, elevator mirror. Jens with his head down, a plastic laundry bag at his ankle, the woman's reflection pushed flat behind him by glass. Timestamp set hard. Jens was already inside. You're late, I said, and let the words just hang there. The taller one followed my eyes toward the parking gate. Their shoulders tightened by instinct, not thought. I slid the keycard out so they could want it. They both watched the wrong thing. I slipped left along the wall and took the service door on the exhale. The hydraulic arm hissed, and then forgot me. Fluorescence hummed over white cinder block. A housekeeping cart sat in the hall with one towel folded into a bird and one wheel misaligned. The air held bleach and old heat. Stairs beat elevators when you don't want witnesses. I took them 2 doors at a time, fingers on the rail to keep noise honest. At 2, the dry erase showed 214 in smeared digits. At 5, the hall carpet tried to swallow steps. I wanted it to. Halfway down, 512 didn't close right. The latch had missed the strike and rested with an open mouth. I pressed with 2 fingers and let it open for me. The TV glowed a menu no one watched. On the desk, a hotel-issued phone lay face up on a tangled cord. Battery low glared in white, pleading for a wall. I thumbed to the camera roll without waking the room. Housekeeping shots in neat sequence. Stains, remotes, proof of towel counts, then a tilt. Hallway mirror. A blurred push of a hand, Jens catching his cap in the lift. They'd photographed their own shortcut. The last image showed a service landing with a painted stencil, 7N. No carpet. A scuffed corner with a crushed paper cup. Her shoulder in frame, a hair caught over the lens like a scratch. They'd used 7 North. The service stair on the north side ran tighter and colder. The metal door complained in a different register. At 7, the air changed. Fresh ice and Freon leaked under a jam. I wiped my palm across the railing and went quiet. Melt water tracked the carpet in a dull ribbon. Melt water always betrays them. The ice room was empty and humming. The drop ceiling had a panel sitting crooked like a loose tooth. A fold-out step stool waited under it, left by hands that needed their hands free. I fixed the panel with my, then pushed it back and went up with knees and elbows. Heat hugged the space and held its breath. Above the rooms, ducks whispered and a wire ran where it shouldn't. Voices bled up through insulation. A man speaking short, clipped, the other a murmur pressed thin. The cadence under the words belonged to Jens. I checked the phone again and killed the screen. 1 bar isn't a plan. A junction box squatted beside the duct with a cracked cover. The hotel never paid to fix what visitors didn't see. I flipped the breaker that shouldn't have been labeled. The corridor lights died in a blink like a throat cut. The voices below broke rhythm, then stilled. I stayed above their ceiling and counted the beats without mercy. The dark held still for 3 breaths. Metal ticked as the ducts cooled. A heel scraped tile below. I shifted my weight and the duct groaned once, then shut up. I slid forward on my forearms and used a coin on the loose vent screws. The coin skipped, then bit. I didn't hurry. The grate came away in my hand without a rattle. A drop to a soffit above the linen closet, then to the floor. The corridor was a green smear of exit signs and carpet seams. Emergency lights hadn't kicked. Money saved looked the same in every hotel. I put my back to the wall and let my eyes write the hallway. Keys kissed metal down the bend. Whispered breath, not prayer. A door opened a hand's width. Her face found the dark the way a cat does, patient and certain. The dead phone in her grip was a prop now. She stepped forward with her hand on the wall and kept her chin down. She stopped when she met my shoes. You cut them, she said, voice flat as the carpet. I held the phone up and scrolled without looking at her. Service lift. 213. Rear entrance. 226. Room 417. 231. Her shoulder twitched when the manager's sleeves slid into frame. She didn't blink. I didn't ask her to explain a sequence. 2 shapes crowded the doorway behind her, shoulders wide, mouths breathing for noise and courage both. 1 step left to flank. I thumbed the breaker on the junction box and pulsed the corridor lights to blast white for a heartbeat, then nothing again. Footing went bad. I was already inside their reach when the dark fell back. The fire door took their weight, and I dropped the latch pin with my boot. 1 cursed into the seam and banged a fist. The other tried going low. My knee met him first. The door held. He sucked air through his teeth and went quiet. I didn't wait for a second try. I took her elbow and let go again so she could see I wasn't asking. She came anyway. The maintenance stair coughed up dust when we opened it. I showed her the screen in the dim, the envelope passing hands, her eyes on the floor, him looking at the camera like he owned it. She looked at the hinge instead of the phone. Battery low, I said. Was that the cue? She lowered her head a degree. Not a nod. Not denial. He said it would be clean, she answered, eyes on the paint blister. You misled me, I said, and put the phone back in my pocket. Metal screamed 2 floors down. They'd found the other stair. I spun the valve on the standpipe a quarter turn until it shrieked. Alarm stayed dead. The horn was on another circuit. Good for me, bad for them. I wedged the hose rack brace under the handle and pulled it tight. Footsteps hit our landing, fast and wrong. I waited in the hinge shadow and let their shoulders break the door a crack. When the gap opened, I slammed the brace down and snapped the edge of the standpipe key into the first throat that appeared. He gurgled once and folded. The other backed down the stairs and took his noise with him. I picked the dropped keycard off the step and slid it into my cuff. She watched my hands and not my face. We go to the feed, I said and started down. She didn't ask which one. You chose this hotel for a reason, I said when we hit the next landing. She touched the rail with 2 fingers, then took them back. Because they keep everything, she said barely over the hum. The DVR rooms sat under concrete and generators, past the ice machine and a door that didn't want to exist. I swiped the card and listened for footsteps that didn't come. I opened to the machines that never sleep. The racks push air into our faces. I set the card on the reader and took the chair. She stayed by the hinge and kept her hands to herself. The screens stacked themselves into a grid. I brought up the date. 2:13. The minute her text spun out, the cursor jogged the night like a blade. She shifted once, the way people do when a tooth hurts. This won't help, she said, not moving closer. I cut audio that didn't exist and punched in the hall. Elevator cam showed her hood, the cable looped around her wrist. She walked straight to the ice, a small coil sliding from her sleeve. The phone lit her hand like a match. My screen showed her thumbs. Battery icon green. She typed anyway and held it for the lens, like proof offered to the wrong court. The timestamp gave me the answer. I split the feeds. Service hall, stairwell, back dock. She waited in the alcove until the night manager swiped, chin down, eyes counting. His wristband flashed once and went dark. A figure took my jacket from a hanger on 6, hood up, same build, same shoes. He walked into her room, badge in the hand. She watched the door like a clock. The cart blocked the stair camera, but not enough. A bag went one way. A keycard went the other. She didn't touch him when it happened. Stop, she said, almost to the floor. I let the clip run and opened export. The drive in my pocket had weight that wasn't metal. You misled me, I said, writing a name I wouldn't forget in the file name. She didn't argue. She pushed her sleeve past her wrist and put it back. The hum handled any answer. I scrubbed to the dock camera. She left at 3:06 through the roll-up gate. No bag now, jacket folded to look like mine. The manager closed the gate and checked his watch. The rest was housekeeping in gray corridors. No hero angles. No second chances the way stories want them to be. The machines had it all. She stepped closer and broke the distance she'd kept all night. What do you do with it? She asked, not loud and not small. I ejected the drive and locked the session. She watched my hands instead of my face. I took back the card and killed the grid. The racks kept breathing like they didn't know our names. I kept the drive. I kept the hallway. I kept the time. I left the rest where it belonged. We moved past ice and the door that wanted out of the wall. Footsteps started 3 floors up, slow, not yet sure of us. I closed the door on their doubt. In the stairwell she took my jacket from the rail and handed it back. The sleeves were cold. She didn't hold on when I took it. Outside, her phone was full. She powered it down and hid it in her pocket. The proof didn't care who held it.